do you know who's qualified to guide you? No, this is not a trick question, guys. It's actually probably one of the most important questions you need to ask yourself. There are many coaches in the world for business, life coaches, relationship coaches, leadership coaches, health coaches, ministry coaches, personal branding coaches. And at the time of this recording, in most places around the world, anyone can legally call themselves a coach. There's no license required, no governing body approval, no universal educational standard. A person can just wake up tomorrow, create a website, open a social media account, print a business card, and voila, they have decided that they are a coach, and that's how they will present themselves to the world.
Money should never be the goal, but it is a fantastic outcome of doing the right things and doing the right things right.
Now, before I go any further, I want to be clear. I'm not against coaching. I've hired coaches. I have a coach. I have been coached. I coach others myself. I am a coach. In fact, years ago, I went and got my master's degree in counseling simply because I understood the coaching industry had no academic credentials, and I figured that that credential was the closest I could come to give myself a value-added perception in the industry. But when I was doing that experience, my master's in counseling, I realized, because they were very careful to qualify coaches, therapists, counselors, psychologists, pastors, the various avenues that may have some slight overlap in the coaching industry, to differentiate between each one and to identify the landscape, if you will, that each primarily dominates in. So what I discovered during that time was very, very fascinating. And my degree definitely added to my confidence in the space. It certainly increased my knowledge and understanding of the dynamics of people and how they behave and how they think. So while I had the credentials and competence coming out of the master's in counseling, pastoral counseling in particular, my doctorate now is in leadership, strategic leadership, but at the time my master's was in pastoral counseling. Let me just say, a credential can increase confidence. It does not guarantee competence. There's a difference between confidence, competence, and credentials. So the absence of a credential does not automatically mean the absence of competence in the space. So as we look at the coaching industry, what I call the wild, wild west of the coaching industry, how do we really know who to trust? How do we know who should be speaking into our lives? How do we know who is qualified to guide us? In my social media, I get DM'd all the time, direct messages all the time from somebody who labeled themselves a coach and just figured because they have decided they're a coach, they should have the opportunity to coach me. It doesn't work like that. I am very guarded about who gets to speak into my life on purpose. And you will understand why I feel that way by the end of this presentation. And maybe you also will have some ways to identify and filter for who speaks into you, or maybe even how you position yourself if you are a coach, and how you speak into the lives of those you are called and purposed to speak into. How do we know who to trust? How do we know who to allow to speak into our lives? Interestingly, Jesus addressed this very issue, and he warned us about something that he called blind guides. So Jesus asked a simple question, and I'm asking it of you today. Can the blind lead the blind? Will they not both fall into the pit? That was what Jesus proposed. Can the blind lead the blind? Will they not both fall into the pit? So today we're going to explore what that means in the age of the coaching era and influencers and AI-generated expertise, which gives us unlimited access to advice today. This is the Bible on Business and Influence Bible Study. I'm your host, Dr. Trudy Beerman. We meet Sundays at 8 p.m. Eastern. Thank you for watching live or later. Now, there is an RSVP link that will be added at the end of this live. And should you want to participate in this Bible study in the live experience, please go ahead and tap the RSVP link, because if you do, then that will signal to me to actually go to the studio, hang out with you, and that allows us to hug, pray with and for each other. And if you are physically in the room, trust me, I'm going to tap you to read scripture, opening prayer, something like that. The Bible and Business Bible Study also has a mobile app. I invite you to download the app. From the app, you can join the Bible study on the go. No excuses, no matter where you are in the world. There's also a community feature. Now, we had to update that recently, so I apologize if you had any issues with the membership area recently, but we upgraded it. Anyway, there's a community feature, and the beauty of that is it allows us to connect with each other, each of us of like mind, and build real relationships with others who believe as we do. Also housed in the app is the Bible on Business book. It was a bestseller at the time, and the accompanying workbook. Now, it is sold in the marketplace, but it is in the app at no cost to you. And should you go through the devotionals, the workbook is interactive, so you can record your prayers, your insights, your ahas. It will save it and keep your progression. So let's see what the Word of God has to say today about becoming an influential leader using biblical principles. This is a point in the study where, if you're new to this, I want to just let you know, unlike your pastor or your spiritual leader, I am not trying to do a theological breakdown of the text. I'm not. I am looking at this with very practical eyes, implementation eyes. What can we pull at a principle level that we can apply today, 2026, in our businesses, in our organizations, in our lives? So today, again, the topic is blind guides, the wild, wild west of the coaching industry. The focus of today's study comes out of Matthew 23 in general, but the highlight verse is verse 16, where Jesus said, Jesus is speaking here, "Woe to you, blind guides, which say, whosoever shall swear by the temple, it is nothing. But whosoever shall swear by the gold of the temple, he is a debtor." So Jesus is calling these people blind guides. Now, I do want you to read the entire text of Matthew 23. I will pull many of the verses for today's study out of this text, but I'm not going to read the whole chapter. It's several verses, and I want to honor your time. So please read it for yourself, but I will be using many verses from this chapter, Matthew 23, today. "Woe unto you, scribes, Pharisees, hypocrites, for you compass land and sea to make one proselyte. And when he is made, you make him twofold more the child of hell than yourselves." So again, I invite you to read Matthew chapter 23. Jesus is speaking. He's primarily speaking to the Pharisees and the scribes. These are the elite, the leadership of the land. In that days, church and state really didn't have a separation. They were the leaders of the time. They were knowledgeable about the Torah, the written word of God as it existed up to that point. They did not have the New Testament. And they were not only the spiritual leaders, they were also the governing leaders of the time. Jesus calls them hypocrites, okay? But in this particular verse, it says, "Ye compass sea and land to make one proselyte." Now, guys, if you follow me at all, you know I talk about influential reach. Influential reach. Everything that I do, including this study, has a foundation in the concept of influential reach. Now, in these days, with influencers, people think it means how many followers you have. That's not how I define influential reach. Influential reach is the transformational impact that we have over an ever expanding audience base. So Jesus is saying to these scribes, Pharisees, hypocrites, that they have gone out of their way to build an audience base, to build their influential reach. Now, there's nothing wrong with building an influential reach. this actually says they were successful at that. If you read it in context, it's basically saying they were successful at doing that. But it says that these leaders were strategic, they were they were active, they were intentional. The problem was not their influential reach. The problem was what they were multiplying in their influential reach. Now, today, with the internet and AI and phones, which was not available in the day, it is much easier for us to connect with people far away. Back in those days, Jesus included, was going across land and sea to get their followers. We don't have to do that today, but those scribes and Pharisees would have done that. They would have traveled just as Jesus did to build their audience base. So when I talk about building your audience, as I have in other studies, this is an important aspect. It's just that Jesus is condemning them for what they're multiplying as they build this audience base. So he says, the devastating assessment that Jesus makes is, and when he is made, the proselyte is made, ye make him twofold more the child of hell than yourself. So in other words, they're already children of hell. There's another section in the Bible where Jesus refers to them, you are of your father, the devil. Now, I'm not going to get into the conversation about God is the father of all and who is Jesus, because Jesus is making a distinction between the Pharisees as children of the devil. And again, here he says, twofold more the child of hell. He's saying the Pharisees and scribes are children of hell, and they are expanding the hell agenda. They are expanding the influential reach of the hell agenda. If you are listening to this Bible study, I'm going to assume you are not a part of that agenda. So you want to build your influential reach as they have done, but we, the Christ follower, we are not building the health agenda. So in other words, a student will always become a magnified version of the teacher. Jesus said that when they made the proselyte, the follower, they made them twofold more the child of hell than they, the leaders themselves, were. When you get followers and they follow you, there's a good chance that they're going to be an amplified, magnified version of the teacher. That is leadership. That is coaching. That is serious influence. But do not assume, ladies and gentlemen, that large audiences and large follower bases means you have a good guide. In today's ecosystem where influencers, and we look at the size of their following, we just assume that they're good guys, they're good people. Not necessarily. Jesus is calling out the blind guides, the scribes, the Pharisees, the hypocrites that have a large follower base that are making more and more children of hell. So we need to do the opposite. We need to be just as vigilant about building our audience reach for the kingdom of heaven, because this verse in Matthew 23, verse 15 proves exactly that. The Pharisees had influential reach without truth. But we Christians tend to have the truth without the influential reach. One group is multiplying for the kingdom of hell. I'm calling on you, we, including me, need to be vigilant, active, traveling, doing what we need to do to actively expand the kingdom of heaven, the agenda and the kingdom of heaven. We possess the truth, and we really need to make extra effort to expand our influence. In verse 5, Jesus says, but all their works they do to be seen of men. They make broad their phylacteries and enlarge the borders of their garments, and they love the uppermost room at feasts and the chief's seat in the synagogue and greetings in the marketplace, and to be called of men, Rabbi, Rabbi. But all their works they do to be seen of men. These are, in my ecosystem, when I talk about influential reach, if you follow me at any level, you're going to hear me talk about authority signals. Jesus is sharing with us right here the authority signals that these scribes and Pharisees make sure they have in place. So there's no question. You know exactly who they are, and they do it to be seen by you, by men. They want the glory and, oh my gosh, it's an important person. In today's economy, authority signals would look like follower counts, verification badges, stage photos, luxury lifestyle displays, celebrity proximity, title collecting. You see some people with so many letters after their name, title collecting, personal branding without any substance. The appearance of, but not the reality of. Virtue signaling is not the same as authority signaling, because authority signals point to something real, point to genuine authority. The authority signals should represent reality. And Jesus says in verses 16 through 19, woe unto you, ye blind guides, which say, whoever shall swear by the temple, it is nothing. But whoever shall swear by the gold of the temple, he is a debtor. Ye fools and blind, for whether is greater, the gold or the temple that sanctifieth the gold? And whosoever shall swear by the altar, it is nothing, but whosoever sweareth by the gift that is upon it, he is guilty. Ye fools and blind, for whether is greater, the gift or the altar that sanctifieth the gift? Jesus is making a point here about the focus. The danger, guys, is rarely complete falsehood. The best lies have a strong measure of truth to them. The danger is distortion. If Satan showed up wearing a red suit with horns and a pitchfork, nobody was going to follow him. He actually looks like an angel of light. The most effective counterfeit looks remarkably similar to the authentic. That's why Jesus talks about the wolf in sheep's clothing and the wheat and the tares. So the Pharisees aren't rejecting the temple, the altar, worship, sacrifice, or God. They're using all the right language. They're standing in all the right places. They're referencing all the right symbols, but Jesus calls them fools and blind. Why? Because they reverse the order of things. The temple sanctifies the gold. The gold does not sanctify the temple. The altar sanctifies the gift. The gift does not sanctify the altar. They have elevated the created thing above the thing that gives it meaning. Much like how people put their trust in the universe over the God of the universe. The modern coaching application would be quite relevant because a lot of the coaches in the industry, they don't really reject the truth, but they reposition it. For example, success may become more important than purpose. Revenue may be positioned as more important than the service that brings the revenue. Followers may become more important than the transformation of the followers. Visibility may become more important than the value given when visible. Personal glory may become more important than impact. If this language sounds familiar or similar, it's because the priorities of some coaches are worldly, but you are not going to A, use those coaches, or be one of those coaches. And if you do use one of those coaches, keep your kingdom filter on, because these coaches that have a worldly mindset and a worldly focus are running almost parallel to the truth. And that is the danger. And this is why coaching in this era, the wild, wild west, with no regulation, no licensing, no credentialing requirement, is scary. A lot of coaches can truly be wolves in sheep's clothing. I am not bashing the coaching industry. Please don't take it that way. I am myself a coach. I am asking you to put your guard up and be very alert and aware of the people who present themselves as coaches before you get engaged with them. Verses 25 through 28. Now, I have not covered all the verses of Matthew 23. However, let's look at these verses. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you make the You may clean the outside of the cup and the platter, but within they're full of extortion and excess. Extortion and excess. Extortion and excess. That is a harsh claim right there. Thou blind Pharisee, cleanse first that which is within the cup and the platter, that the outside of them may be clean also. Woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for ye are like unto whited sepulchres or whitewashed tombs, which indeed appear beautiful outwards, but are within full of dead men's bones and of all uncleanness. Even so, ye also outwardly appear righteous unto men, but within ye are full of hypocrisy and iniquity. If you thought that Jesus was full of love and just coming to be so sweet and kind, understand right here, he has completely trashed the scribes and the Pharisees. He has called them out, and he has just laid it out right here and told us that the leaders of the land, the leaders of the religious times, were, many of them, hypocrites. So throughout this chapter of Matthew 23, we see that in verse 5, these men of the day, the leaders of the day, wanted to be seen. Same with coaches today. Many of them want to be seen. They're focused on making converts, or their proselytes. Same today. We're building our audience base. Verse 16, in verse 16, he points out they were blind guides. By verse 23, he talks about the tithe and the mint and the cumin, that they had misplaced priorities. By verse 25, Jesus tells us that they have looked good on the outside, but they were filthy on the inside. By verse 27, he refers to them as whitewashed tombs, beautiful on the outside, death on the inside. By verse 28, he shows us that they're outwardly appearing to be righteous men. This entire chapter of Matthew 23 could be summed up this way: appear to be, but is not. Appear to be, but is not. So what do we do with all of this? What do we do with all of this? How do we avoid ourselves becoming blind guides? Or how do we avoid following blind guides, or to find guides worth following? Well, I have 4 practical takeaways for you. 4 practical takeaways. First of all, if you are a coach, mentor, leader, teacher, parent, pastor, or influencer, never stop learning. Never stop learning. That's your first takeaway. Never stop learning, because the moment we believe we have arrived is often the moment we stop seeing. We need to stay teachable. We need to stay curious. We need to stay humble. So first of all, stay teachable. Stay teachable. Second, let your results speak louder than your titles. Credentials do have value. Experience does have value, but the fruit matters more. The fruit matters more. People are ultimately transformed by what works, not what is printed on a business card. So the second takeaway, let your results speak louder than your titles. So even if you don't have titles, great. Your results can still speak for you. Third, before following any guide or any coach, look for evidence. Not perfection, evidence. What fruit has their life produced? Is the fruit their life has produced the fruit you are trying to model? What outcomes have they created? What outcomes have they created? Who have they helped? Can they demonstrate the vision that they claim to possess? Do they model what they teach? Not just do as I say, but do as I do. So that's your third thing. Look for the evidence. And finally, remember, the ultimate goal for the coach, for the guide, should not be how many followers you have. Followers will come, because the better you are, more people will come to you. That's what happened with Jesus. He healed and people started flocking to him. So the results will bring more people. But don't focus on the number of followers. Focus on the number of people that have a transformation. Jesus didn't tell us to accumulate people. He told us to make disciples. Disciples are converts. Disciples are transformed, repented people. So there is a transformation that comes, and that the number of those people are more worth counting than just a total follower count. So some coaches count people, others count transformed lives. The Pharisees traveled sea and land to gain followers. Jesus traveled sea and land to transform lives. And that is a standard we should hold ourselves to. So as you're building your coaching practice, ministry, business, brand, or simply influencing those around you, the question is not how many people are following you. The question is, are the people around me becoming healthier, wiser, stronger, and closer to God because of my influence? If the answer is yes, then you are seeing clearly and you are not a blind guide. But if the answer is no, perhaps it is time to pause, seek wisdom, and ask God to help you see and not be yourself a blind guide. Join me next week. We are going to look at stewardship versus self-promotion, a framework for the Christ follower. Stewardship versus self-promotion. Dr. Trudy Beerman here. Thank you.